to Trinity Community Business Enrichment Center. I am your teacher, Nikki Garcia. I'm so glad that you can join me on today. I have a BS in Computer Information Systems from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. I've been doing websites for over 11 years, and I'm so glad to teach you on today. So let's delve into our next course. This is Module 3. We'll be teaching a little bit about cascading style sheets. We're going to teach you how to lay out your web page using cascading style sheets, and then we're going to delve into in Module 4 actually doing our first website. So here we go. So now we have our style sheet open. If you're in Dreamweaver, you basically would say File New, and you would go to CSS. I already had that open, so I'm going back. It's going to be style.css. That's what I named it. You want to go ahead on and save it with File, Save As, and you don't necessarily have to declare what type of document this is, like you would in HTML, because HTML has to know what you're doing. So you have to say open and close and let it know that this is a style sheet. But since you're already declaring it by the name of it, style.css, the computer will know how to interpret the file. Okay, so we can just get moving and start typing into our file. The first component that you normally deal with a style sheet is the body. I think we might have explained this in the previous class. And inside of your body, what you want to do is you want to deal with how the font looks. You want to deal with your background colors. You want to deal with the font size, and you also want to deal with the font family. So let's start with the font family. And normally you have Times New Roman. Some people like to use Arial. And then we want to deal with our background. Now, if you're dealing with divs, and remember we talked about divs in the previous lesson, you know, div represents division, and it's just the little containers that are on your site. So normally inside of those divs, you would put your background image. And if you want it to be a background image on the entire page that spans across the page, you could define it right here inside of your body. And most of the time, let's just say, just for craps and giggles, background attachment. Oh, I'm sorry. Background. We just wanted to be background. And then you click on the URL. Out of images, you could choose any one of the images here. So let's just say I'm using logo 4. Logo 4 is huge. It's 2700 by 2700 pixels. And when you put that in there, what'll happen is on your main page in your body of your HTML document, that will be the main image. But I'm just showing you this just for teaching's sake. We're not going to go and look at that right now, but that's what you can do to set your background. We don't want to set any kind of background, but you can. The font color, that's the other thing that you can set. The color can be black, it could be blue, it could be whatever you define it as. And we talked about this in the previous class as well. Font size, let's deal with that. I like 16 to 18 for font size. And that's pretty much the things that you will put inside of your, oh yeah, remember margins. Now, what ends up happening is a lot of times when you have a website, sometimes you have this extra space around the website. And if you want your website to be tight, which I think I've even expressed this in the previous lesson, but if you want your website to be tight where there's no space where the site comes down some, you set your margins to 0. So it's 0, and then you can say auto. And when you do this particular action, what happens is you're saying that the margins all the way around the site should be tight. There should be no white space. So you set your margins. And also one thing you have to remember as well in browsers, now this really did work in older browsers, but what also has occurred now with the newer browsers is that you have to define the size of the space so that the auto margin can work. So sometimes what you will see when people want to space a div or have it centered on side of a page, they'll say margin left auto, margin right auto, and it's supposed to just basically make everything centered. But what happens in the newer browsers, it doesn't necessarily know how to do it if you don't define the width of the page. So if you find that margin 0 auto is not working for you and you still have white space, or in some scenarios that your div isn't being centered, then what you will end up doing is you'll define your width, and the width of what your body would be or your main container would be, or whatever the case may be. This is not necessary for the body, but I'm just giving you information ahead of time when it comes down to divs, since I was mentioning divs. Okay, so you have your font family, you have your font size, you have your margin, and you have your color, okay? So that's one of the components of CSS, the main component. Then the next thing you want to be able to do is classes. And you create classes and apply these classes to your divs, okay? So a class would be like this. You'll put a dot, a period, and you'll name it. Let's just say new class. You can name it whatever you want to name it. It doesn't matter. They also have an open and close bracket, okay? And inside of that class, you define how you want that div to function. So as we were talking about earlier, we want the margins to be centered. So we do the margin 0 and auto. And then thereafter, let's just say you have some other kind of functionality you want to do, to have a background color. And the background color could be blue. Another functionality that you might want to do, you might want to set the width. And the width just basically says how wide the container would be. Most of the times, most monitors, you kind of go about 1,000 nowadays, because people's monitors are very, very huge. So 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. When you're dealing with responsive design and adaptable design, you want to go more into EMs. And you can actually go on Google and look up a website that says, convert pixels to EM, and then it will give you the correct number to put in. But for now, let's just say 1,000 pixels by height auto. And the reason why you set your height to auto is because inside of this container, you want it to be easily expandable based on what you put inside the container. So you have your margins tight, and based on what goes in it, it will begin to just basically grow with the content that you put inside of your div. Okay. Another thing that we utilize, there's this thing that you can give your div an ID. And by ID, you can always also enforce the functionality of a class. So you use that by putting the number sign and then in a name, which it could just be anything, hat, pound, hat. And in here, you can say what the font size could be. Font color could be, which that's represented by color, not font dash color, but color. It's so funny how the other ones are font dash size, font dash family, but for color, it's just color. Font family, and we just randomly choose 3. And the reason why you choose 3 is because there are times where, and if you're choosing Times New Roman and you're choosing Arial, then this might not necessarily occur. But let's say, for instance, you choose a font that might not be supported by the browsers. So when you do that, you try to choose alternatives, and normally in groups of 3, so that when the browser encounters a font that it doesn't support, it can go to the next font. So that's the reason why you'll see 3 fonts inside of the font family, okay? So now, this is basically what you have done. You have done your body, your new class, and your pound hat. I like to normally deal with classes. I don't really necessarily like to deal with div IDs. It's nothing wrong with them. That's just my personal preference. So when it comes down to cascading style sheets, what you want to do mainly is you want to go ahead on and add a style to your header of your document, add a style to the body, the content of your document, and you want to add a style to your footer. So if I had to develop it for you, I would basically do it a little something like this. So now I have in Photoshop, I've designed a website for Shade Tree Essentials. And if you look at the top, you have your logo, you have your social media icons, and then you have all of your links. If you were to break the site up, and let me put my rulers up so you can see. If you were to break the site up, where that ruler stops, that would be considered your header, okay? And then where the next ruler stops, where I'm dragging the next ruler, all of that will be considered your content, okay? So the top will be, you will have a big main div, typically. And then where the top is, you'll have the header div, you have the content div, and then right up under that last ruler that I put, last green ruler, you will have your footer div, okay? And so let's go back to the cascading style sheet that we created, style.css. So when you create this, you will now probably have something that looks a little more like, this is what my header would look like, and this is what my footer would look like. Okay, and you define those things in your CSS, and then you connect them to your web document so that you can see what that looks like. It's defined like so. Link rel equals style sheet. So you're basically saying this is a link, and it's a style sheet. You're telling it what type of document it is. It's a text/CSS. That doesn't ever change. That stays the same. And the location of it. And the link is stylesheet.css, okay? So that's basically how you lay out your website and how you utilize CSS to lay those things out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little fun and a little more interactive. Is we're going to try to create divs, side-by-side divs. And I'm going to let you see how when you develop a site, your divs can be side-by-side, or you can use a table. You can use tabular data to accomplish it, or you can use a div. Okay, so let me open up a new document. Okay, I'm going to go in code and design mode, and we're going to go inside of our body. So now we're going to create our main div, which is the big container for everything, okay? And I'm going to kind of write a comment here. Comments in HTML look like a greater less than sign, sorry, exclamation mark, dash, dash. And then you type inside of it, and you close it with a dash, dash, dash. So what we're going to put inside of the comment is we're going to say, this is the main div. Now, when you put a comment on the page, it will not show up to anyone. Nobody will be able to see it. If you look at the source code, you'll be able to see it. But inside, like on your artwork or your design that you've created for your website, you will not be able to see it. So this is the reason why we utilize these tags, so that people can understand what's going on in the code. Because sometimes when you're doing HTML documents, because they're so extensive, like for instance, when you really start getting into creating your drop-down menus and using CSS to manipulate them, and pages that go on and on and on and on and on, sometimes you need to be able to define what section, what area you're in. So what this would allow you to do is to be able to say, okay, this is what this div is for, because you can have a bunch of divs on your page and get totally confused as to, okay, where's the open, where's the close for this, and whatever the case may be. So we don't want you to be confused. So in lieu of that, you kind of put comments. So this is the main div, and then you want to go ahead and say, this is the closing of the main div. Okay, And that's what that looks like. Okay, so we have our main div, and we wanna create a div that's side by side. So this is the next thing. You create another div inside of your main div, and this will be the div that goes to the left. Okay. So let's just write inside of it, this div goes to the left. Okay. Then you want to go ahead on and create another div, and it will be your div that goes to the right. This div goes to the right. Okay, so now we want to go ahead on and put some styles on these divs so that they can lay out properly, because right now they're just going to be a div that is right up under each other, as you can see on the screen. So what you do is div style, and I think we talked about this, where you can add styles directly into your HTML document. It doesn't necessarily have to have an external style sheet. It's better practice to have an external style sheet just for organization. But I mean, there are people who just put styles inside of their document, and it's perfectly fine. Okay, so we have div style, and we want to do float. Okay, so now this is another functionality that you can add, or attribute you can add into your Cascading style sheet. It's called float, and float allows your the object that you're trying to direct to go either to the left or either to the right. So we're going to do float left. Okay, and the next one we're going to do div style for the right one, float right. Okay, now we want to go ahead on and set the width of the div. So your main div, we're going to give it a width of, let's just say 1,000 pixels. I'm sorry. All right, and then anytime you're going to add the next element after that first element in your style, you have to constantly use semicolons. Remember, semicolons end a statement. It lets the computers know that, okay, I'm done with this particular sentence. It's basically like a sentence, okay? So I just told my computer float left, float right. I told the main div to be 1,000 pixels. Oops, I said it's 100 on here, but it should be 1,000. So we're going to say the width of this one, of the left one, the left div, is 400 pixels. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make our left and our right div fit within the constraints of the 1,000 pixels. Okay, so I want one to be bigger than the other one. My right div is going to, oh, I spelled width wrong. Let me go back up. Okay, and width for my right div is 600 pixels. Okay, so that is equivalent to 1,000. Now, another functionality that you can give to a div would be padding. And what does padding do? Padding basically says, okay, now I have this container, and I don't want my text or whatever is inside of that container to be directly at the edge. I want to be able to have some space, because sometimes you can add borders to your divs. You can add all kind of things that will cause text being jumbled to look more jumbled. So when you want that particular space, just that little space, like sometimes people just want a hairline of space from div to div to div to div, you can add padding. So if you're going to do that, you have to make sure that you allocate for that, because now just listen, we have our main div is 1,000 pixels. And we have a left div that's 400 pixels. And then we have a right div that is 600 pixels. Okay, so now we have basically taken all of our space. So you would want to like kind of leave space for the padding and even for the stuff inside of your div. So here we are. I'm going to do a little bit of padding. And this is me not doing it with any consideration to what I just told you. And you can just make that 5 pixels. So now what will happen is you will have 5 pixels on the inside of the div, or all the way around, on the left, the top, the right, and the bottom. Okay? And if you could see, that actually happened. But when you add the padding, what ends up happening is, because you have only 1,000 pixels in your main container, what ends up happening is it goes to the next line. So that's why I was saying you would need to consider compensating for the padding. So let's just go ahead on and make it at 1100 so that everything goes like it's supposed to, side by side. And if you see, now you have your div to the left and you have your div to the right. And you have a little bit of space in between because of the fact that we expanded the initial div. So that was the reason for me not adding or giving any consideration of the padding initially, so that you can see how it went down to the next line. And it didn't line up and they weren't next to each other. It actually went under it. Okay, so there you are. There you have it. You have your div to the left and you have your div to the right, and you used cascading style sheets in order to accomplish it. Now, you can do the same thing in tabular data. Dreamweaver makes this very, very simple. We talked about tables in the past. You just go to Insert, Table, and it has rows and it has columns. We have 1 row, 2 columns. And we want to make the pixels, as far as the width, the table width, 1100. So now you can see that being accomplished on the page. Okay, so I want you to observe the code. You have table width is 1100, border 0, cell spacing is 0, cell padding is 0. So you also can have cell padding as well, and cell spacing, just like you do in your div with a table. Okay? Remember, TR represents each row. We talked about that in the past. And TD represents tabular data, but this will be your different columns that you will encounter. So being right here, we have 2 TDs, so we have 2 columns, one on the left and one on the right. And this column is the left-hand column, and this column, oh, hold on, it moved over. Is the right-hand column. Okay, and so we've accomplished the same thing. So you can lay out your pages using these divs and using tabular data. Now, a lot of people are getting away from just using tables to design. We talked about that in the past. You don't want to use tables to design, but you can use tables, like even in the case of WordPress. Content management is becoming a new thing. And WordPress basically is structured the way that I explained it to you. It's structured like so. You have your header, your content, and your footer. And so this inside of your content, what happens is on the right hand side, if there is blog posts, it has things like archives, login, comments, whatever other links that are over there, and then all your blog posts, all the postings, all the links to all the postings will normally occur there. And so you'll have January, February, 2015, 2016, whatever the case may be. So when it comes to really delving deeper into WordPress, what you will end up doing is when you want to customize it or create your own theme, this will be very, very important to know how to do. Let me be able to separate my divs so that you're not necessarily using tabular data. Okay, so this is where that plays a part. Okay. So we basically learned the anatomy of the style. We've learned how to apply styles to different data types. We even have a data type in our table that and we haven't really applied a style to this, but this can have a style on it as well. You can actually say style, And the style of it could be just the color. The text color could be gray. You can even define the elements inside of the table. So then you can say font family. Uh-oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And you can set the font family as well. And then you can also set the font size, just like we've done previously. It's just so that you can get real world experience on how this works. So as you can see right here, your column, it turned gray because that's the color we chose, CCC, pound CCC. All colors are in hexadecimal decimal when it comes to computers. So you would get things like CCC, 12AD, whatever the case may be. That's just how colors are. So in the case of gray, it's pound CCC. You have some grays that are EA. They're weird numbers, but don't get scared by them, just so that you know what's going on. And then you even see your right-hand column. It has the same font type, and the font size is 16. We could change that font size. It could be 24, and you will see things adjust accordingly. Okay, so that's adding styles to different content. And then let's try something else. We could even, let's attach our style sheet that we created earlier to this document right here. Let me just name it layout.html. And then the style sheet name was style.css. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is, did you see how the font changed? Isn't that wonderful? It was already adapting, because we had in our body, we had our body as Times New Roman. So it changed from even it overwrote what I had as what the text font should be. Okay, so anyways, one of the classes that we have is header. And so we can go ahead and add a class to our left div that we were talking about earlier. Hold on, let me show you how you utilize that. You say div class. And you see, because we've attached, hold on 1 second. Because we've attached our style sheet, now the classes will begin to show up. So hold on, let me go back so you can see what Dreamweaver does. So we had a class header and footer. Remember, we renamed the class. So we're going to go ahead on and say header. And what happens is my left div now has the blue background that we talked about earlier. And then I'm going to go to my right div and I'm going to add the next class. And we're going to put footer on that one. And then you see the text goes gray. And that coincides with the style. Header, background color, 00F, which was blue. And then the color of the font was CCC, which is gray. Okay, so that's how you pretty much lay out your site. That's how you apply the styles to your site. So, you know, when you get ready to design, you have some kind of idea of how things function. Okay, so that deals with cascading style sheets. Now the next thing we're going to go on to is graphics. When you're getting ready to incorporate graphics in your website, you have lots and lots of graphics. And graphics can be high res, they could be kind of medium, or they can be low res. Okay, now for the internet, a lot of times what we use 72 DPI. DPI stands for dots per inch. Okay, and what that represents is on your monitor, every picture is nothing but a bunch of dots. That's all it is. And you see the bigger picture, but if you were to zoom out or zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, let's just say you got like a 300% zoom in. When you get that 300% zoom in, you'll start seeing it being like all these little squares. And that is basically the dots, okay? So when we're talking about resolution, okay, resolution is the number of pixels in an image. Even though this is, they misuse that term a lot of times, saying that it's the number of pixels in an image. Sometimes that's kind of incorrect. But if we're using the term to describe pixel count, one convention is to express resolution as the width by the height. For example, monitor resolution of 1280 by 1024. That means there is 1280 pixels from one side to the other side of the monitor, okay? From 1024 from the top to the bottom. So, I mean, this is gonna kind of be over your head a little bit, but that's what resolution is when it comes down to images. So sometimes when people give you a high-res image, they're normally like, the dots per inch will be like 300 dpi. Sometimes it goes a little higher than that. And then the images, that means that the space between the dots between the images are a little more, or they're a little more finer. When they're low res, the space between the dots are a little more spaced out. And then that means that when you get ready to utilize graphics in like a high print scenario, in a print scenario, if it's low res, then they normally can't utilize it because the resolution is low, okay? And then we want to talk about pixels. So pixels are computer-based images that are comprised of thousands of tiny dots of colors called pixels. Dots of colors, this is what we were talking about. These are small dots you see, and if you put your face really close to the monitor or to the TV, you'll start seeing the little dots. I know you've probably seen that from time to time, like, oh my God, I see these little squares. What does that mean? Those are the pixels, okay? So, and what are the pixels used for? Pixels are used for color information for your image. And they can either be RGB format, which is red, green, and blue, or you can have 4 components, which is CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, okay? So when you're doing any kind of graphics of any kind of sort, this is just this little printing intro or whatever. This is normally what you have to deal with. So when you're going online and you're getting your images, I just want you to know what you're encountering, okay? So if you get an image from online, let's just say I'm on Google right now, and I'm just gonna type in dog. And I'm gonna go to images, and you get all these little cute doggies. Now, let me find one that seems not to be too hot, like that's low res. Okay, let me see. This one right here looks a little low res. Sometimes when you download the images, when you put them on your website, then they end up looking bad. And then you're saying to yourself, well, why is my images looking bad? It just behooves you to really invest in images when it comes to websites. Even if you're gonna take pictures from off of your phone, if you have a phone that can potentially take high definition photos, then that's really good. But some people don't, and the phone renders crappy photos, and then we put those crappy photos on our website. So it behooves us to go to places like Photolio.com, Dreamstime.com, iStockPhoto.com, those types of things where they have royalty-free images and you pay for your images. Yes, you have to pay for your images. If you don't take them yourself, you need to pay for your images. Do not steal images off the internet. That is not the right way to handle things. It's not the right way to put things on your website. And what ends up happening is sometimes, in the case of big corporations who can't afford to have people that patrol websites, when they see their images on someone else's website, what they do is they have their lawyers come after you about their images. So let's not steal photography, steals people original images. Make sure that you take the time to invest in your site and to make a conscientious decision not to steal. Please don't steal the images from other people's websites. So many people do that. Let me show you one of the photo people that I go to, for lack of a better word. This is Fotolia. And they have pretty economical images. I'm going to type in dog here just so you can see. You can get all kind of images and they're royalty free. You won't have to worry about somebody trying to come and sue you later on, okay? So that's how that works. Now, what I did want to show you when it came to images is how the resolution affects the bandwidth, okay? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a page and I'm just going to put an image on it. One is high res and one is low res, just so you can see how this image affects the bandwidth and how it affects the loading time of a website, okay? So here we go. Where am I? There we go. So let me find one of our high-res images. Because I know the logos, anytime I develop a logo, I kind of make it high-res. So I'm going to try to put one of these big high-res images on here. Okay, I can scroll up and down and goes and goes and goes. So that's a really big image, and it's a high-res image as well. 300 dpi. And then I'm going to put a small image on here. Actually, I'm going to put the small image on the top of the big image. Hold on, let me get just this one. This one's a pretty small one. All right, and I'm going to name this image test. Okay, and so here we go. We're going to upload image test to our server that I'm playing on. Okay, and the name of the site is Shade Tree Moisturizer. So I'm going to go to ShadeTreeEssentials.com. Sorry, and then I'm going to go to I'm going to go to tools.pingdom.com. Now, tools.pingdom.com, what it does is it parses your site to let you know how much time each image is taking to load and how long your site loads. Now, earlier on today, I was on Shade Tree Essentials and I just submitted this request earlier. And as you can see, they give you a grade and they let you know what your load time is, how many seconds it took, whatever the case may be. So the grade here was 100 out of 100 because it was saying that this website loads 92% faster than all the tested websites that they have encountered, okay? So I'm going to put this images-test.html in here. Let me make sure I spelled it right. No, image. So now we're starting our test. Okay, so as you can see, you have image-test.html. The load time is 1.42 seconds. The page size is a megabyte. Okay, megabyte is pretty small, so it's still pretty good. Even with the high-res logo, if you can see, this high-res logo was 1 megabyte by itself. Okay, now look at the other documents. Just the smaller image, which was shadebutter3.jpg. I mean, that was 13.8 kilobytes. So that was a whole lot smaller than the logo image. And what I'm trying to point out to you is, if you have a bunch of images that are high res and that are overly big, what ends up happening is your load time on your site is awful, okay? And so anybody who tries to go to your site, they can become very frustrated when your load times are crazy. So you want to be very cognizant of what kind of images you're putting on there. Yes, we want them to look good, but you don't want them to be so big that it affects the productivity and the production of your site, okay? Okay, and then, you know, even when you start doing things like commerce, e-commerce and things of that nature and selling, it affects that stuff. You know, a lot of people, they upload all their images. Sometimes you'll see inside of these shopping carts, these user-friendly shopping carts that are like plugins and easy to integrate into your website. You upload all of these images and, you know, it's just, okay, I got this t-shirt and I got that and I got this and I sell this and I sell that. And by the end of all your uploading, the images are so big and they take up so much space. Even though the computer knows, okay, this is high res, but you know what? I can confine it and it shrinks it and it scales it so that it's in proportion. The thing about it is your image is so big that it takes forever for your store to load. So you want to be very cognizant of image load times, okay? Okay, so anyways, that was our demonstration for the image test, okay? And like we even said before, you can even, I do want to show you one more thing because I took that off. A URL background for header. So let's just add a background image for the header. So you see it's background dash image. And you want to get the location of the image. And these images might be too small for that, but let's just do it anyway, just for fun, excuse me. I'm so used to saying craps and giggles. Ignore my foolishness. Okay, so here we go. No. It's side by side. Is it? No, layout. Okay, layout. Okay, so now you can see my div to the left. It has the shea butter image in the background. Okay, and you can see what that looks like. So that's just some extra information on cascading style sheets. All right, that concludes module number 3. And we're going to go into module number 4. We'll create our first web page. That should be fun. And I'll see you then.